Brazil's four largest metropolitan areas have seen massive protests against the far-right Jair Bolsonaro administration. China and the European Union have reaffirmed their commitment to reach a comprehensive bilateral investment agreement this year. Demonstrations took place in Palestine on Monday to reject Israel's annexation plans, which are supported by the United States. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Brazil's four largest metropolitan areas have seen massive protests against the far-right Jair Bolsonaro administration. Our correspondent Brian Meir brings us more details.
Brazil's four largest metropolitan areas have a combined population of nearly 50 million. That's a quarter of the nation's population. And in each one of these areas, São Paulo, Rio, Belo Horizonte, and Brasilia, there were massive protests against far-right President Jair Bolsonaro this Sunday. Now, since the COVID-19 pandemic has begun, every Sunday there have been small, fascist protests calling for the closure of the Supreme Court, which have dominated the media attention. But as people become to realize that it's not as dangerous to appear in protests with masks on and things like that as people had thought in terms of transmitting the disease, and as anger against growing scandals involving the president's family with illegal organized crime militias, with fraud and procurement of chloroquine, and scandals involving resignation of different ministers and federal police investigations, the anger levels are just growing and growing against this regime.
On Monday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro held a video conference with members of the Plan Chamba Juvenil social program to commemorate its third anniversary. The Venezuelan president highlighted that his government's repatriation program has helped thousands of young people return to Venezuela, and thanks to the Chamba Juvenil program, they're being given work opportunities upon arrival. Maduro specified that 70,000 Venezuelans have already returned to the country, and 150,000 or more are expected to arrive soon. He also called on young people to help the social program reach all communities in Venezuela to continue the consolidation of the Bolivarian revolution and offer work training opportunities to all youth.
I have two important duties in this new moment. For the great mission Chamba Juvenil, the first one is the plan Vuelta a la Patria, the creation of study and work opportunities for the young who are returning from Colombia and Brazil. So far, 70,000 Venezuelans have returned to their homeland, and we are predicting the return of 150,000 or more. I would say the 90% of the Venezuelan youth. I give the plan Vuelta a la Patria to the mission Chamba Juvenil, for them to look for answers in the study, work, and entrepreneurship. And the second duty I give you is the plan de territorialización of the great mission Chamba Juvenil. We have to reach the 48,000 communities with the 48,000 brigades of the mission Chamba Juvenil, Comunidad Adentro, Barrio Adentro, Sociedad Adentro.
And the Venezuelan president also held a meeting with the National Dialogue Table. The Monday meeting of the National Dialogue Table, composed of members of the government and representatives of sectors of the Venezuelan opposition, saw the discussion of the country's current political situation in the lead-up to parliamentary elections to be held this year. Also debated were the means to reach agreements through this mechanism installed in September last year following negotiations between the Maduro government and opposition sectors. Venezuelan Vice President for Communications Jorge Rodriguez offered a report on COVID-19 figures this Monday. Rodriguez reported 33 new locally transmitted cases, 2 deaths and 97 imported cases, of which 70 cases came from Colombia, 8 from Brazil, 6 from Ecuador, 3 from Peru, and 10 cases were people who had contact with others who had returned to the country. The Venezuelan official also noted that Venezuela's COVID-19 figures now stand at 4,048 positive cases, of which 1,327 have recovered.
territorio nacional. Así como insistir, no nos cansaremos de hacerlo.
And Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro celebrated the 194th anniversary of the installation of the Congress of Panama this Monday. The president took to his Twitter account to highlight the legacy of the Congress in terms of Latin American unity and solidarity. The Congress was convened by independence leader Simón Bolívar in 1826 and was established as a forum for the new republics of Latin America to discuss matters of common interest and develop a unified policy towards Spain. Held in Panama City from June 22nd to July 15th of that year, the meeting proposed creating a League of American Republics with a common military, a mutual defense pact and a supranational parliamentary assembly. It saw the participation of countries including Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Peru, Venezuela, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, El Salvador and Nicaragua.
A la localidad de Tacubaya, a las afueras de la Ciudad de México.
Gender-based violence in Colombia has increased during the coronavirus lockdown period. According to legal medical records from January to May, there were 355 femicides in the country. 15 women were murdered in the past week alone. Despite current legislation that seeks to punish gender-based violence, the figures continue to rise, with well over 16,000 domestic violence complaints recorded and 6,400 reported sexual crimes during the lockdown.
Conflicto, en donde criminales asesinan a los líderes que restituirán las tierras a los despojados.
And Colombian health authorities reported more than 3,000 new coronavirus cases on Sunday. According to official reports, the COVID-19 death toll now stands at more than 2,000, while over 27,000 people have recovered from the virus. There are now around 39,000 active cases. Colombia has now reported over 68,500 coronavirus cases, ranking 4th in South America. In Chile, opposition parties and social organisations have called on Health Minister Enrique París to strengthen the government's strategy against the COVID-19 epidemic. In a press release, the organisation said that the state's policies have not been working and urged that preventative measures be reinforced during the lockdown. At the same time, they highlighted the ongoing collapse of the healthcare system and blamed authorities for a lack of interest in maintaining effective conditions to ensure that the population could comply with the quarantine. The UN Integrated Office in Haiti, along with another 19 UN agencies, has announced that Haiti needs a strong response to COVID-19 in order to maintain national stability. The UN agencies note they have been working together to maintain the country's delicate balance of stability, security and development. Against the backdrop of long-running social protests, the pandemic is stretching Haiti's already fragile health system and testing its limited social safety net. UN officials also stress that the socio-economic impact of the pandemic is not being addressed with sufficient urgency. A nearly 4,000-mile-long plume of thick dust from the Sahara Desert has reached Puerto Rico. The dust is part of a phenomenon that develops every year off the coast of Africa, known as the Saharan air layer, but the current mass of dry, dusty air is unusually intense. The vast cloud of Sahara dust is blanketing the Caribbean as it heads to the United States, with a size and concentration that experts say hasn't been seen in half a century. And we have more stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In an Oval Office interview with ASIOC's U.S. President, Donald Trump stated he would consider meeting with his Venezuelan counterpart, Nicolas Maduro. Our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Estoso, brings us the details.
Thank you. President Trump on Friday had an interview at the Oval Office with Axios, and he was, in a way, suggesting that he could eventually meet with President Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela. He said, and I quote, "I would maybe think about that. Maduro would like to meet, and I'm never opposed to meetings, rarely opposed to meetings." And then he continues and said, "I've always said you lose very little with meetings, but at this moment I've turned them down." And after that, on Twitter, and I quote his Twitter, he has said, unlike the radical left, that means the Democratic Party, I will always stand against socialism and with the people of Venezuela. My administration has always stood on the side of freedom and liberty and against the oppressive Maduro regime. And he closed the Twitter saying, I would only meet with Maduro to discuss the one thing, just one thing, a peaceful exit from power. President Trump has already said, according to the book of Joe Bolton, in a part of the book that is quoted, he said, it would be cool to invade Venezuela. And then in another part he says, because Venezuela really is part of the United States. So in reality, it's a big question mark if he would really like to meet with President Maduro. And therefore, we have to wait and see what's going on in the next hours. We get back to you now.
Millions of children returned to school in France on Monday as the country started phase 3 of the easing of COVID-19 restrictions. Schools had started gradually reopening from May 11th with strict hygiene measures and limited class sizes. Under the second phase, students were either receiving classes part-time or were homeschooled. Physical distancing measures have now been relaxed and the limit for the number of students in a class has been scrapped. German authorities and representatives of Lufthansa airline are set to vote on a bailout plan this Thursday as the COVID-19 crisis has brought the company to the brink of insolvency. The rescue proposal includes a €9 billion bailout, 2 seats on the board and a 20% stake of the company for the German state. German Finance Minister Olaf Scholz stated on Monday that the suggested plan was a good, carefully considered proposal which has the support of Lufthansa's supervisory board and the European Commission. Meanwhile, the airline's biggest shareholder, Heinz-Hermann Tell, has argued against the bailout, stressing that other airlines such as Air France and KLM have received state aid in the form of loans rather than having to accept government shareholdings. On Monday, China and the European Union reaffirmed their commitment to reach a comprehensive bilateral investment agreement this year. The pledge came during the 22nd China-EU Summit of Leaders via video link. Representatives highlighted the progress made in the negotiations and reaffirmed that both sides were committed to concluding the China-EU Comprehensive Agreement on Investment in 2020. China's top legislature has reviewed a draft law on safeguarding national security in Hong Kong. The draft law includes a provision for the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to establish a commission to safeguard national security, which would be supervised by and accountable to the Central People's Government of China. According to the text, the Central People's Government shoulders the fundamental responsibility for national security related to Hong Kong, while the special region bears the constitutional responsibility of safeguarding national security and fulfilling its obligations. And Chinese President Xi Jinping extended his congratulations to the virtual China-Arab States Political Parties Dialogue Extraordinary Meeting. The meeting, which started on Monday, will see the participation of more than 60 Arab leaders, including Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani. President Xi Jinping stressed in his message that China is willing to reinforce solidarity and cooperation with Arab states, as well as with the international community, to support the World Health Organization in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. South Korean health authorities warned on Monday of a significant resurgence of novel coronavirus cases by the end of the year. The announcement comes as COVID-19 cases continue to spike in the metropolitan and Chungcheong areas.
Recently, we found out that our predictions that COVID-19 will slow down in the summer were all incorrect, and we believe that the virus outbreak will continue as long as there are close contacts between people in close spaces. Experts are warning that if we fail to prevent further spread in the metropolitan area and Shanxiong area and let the size of infections increase, then such infections will accumulate and a bigger wave of virus could come in the near future, not waiting until the autumn. Therefore, we are in a situation where we need to slow down the virus spread and reduce the size of the virus outbreak.
And we're taking one last very short break now, so stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. Demonstrations took place in Palestine on Monday to reject Israel's annexation plans, which are supported by the United States. Chanting Palestine is not for sale and no Palestinian state without the Jordan Valley, demonstrators gathered in the Palestinian city of Jericho. Early this year, U.S. President Donald Trump announced his Middle East peace plan, which includes the annexation of West Bank settlements and the Jordan Valley by the Israeli regime, despite UN resolutions and agreements on the issue. Meanwhile, UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process, Nikolai Mailadnov, noted that if Israel continues with its plan, it could kill the very idea that peace and statehood for the Palestinian people can be reached through negotiations. The number of coronavirus cases in Pakistan has surpassed 180,000, while the death toll stands at over 3,500. Pakistani health authorities have warned of a possible rise to 1 million cases by the end of July. Meanwhile, over 3,000 cases have been confirmed among health professionals. Pakistan is now the fourth worst hit country in the region after India, Iran and Turkey.
So far today, in 24 hours, 136 people died due to COVID-19, and more than 6,000 cases were recorded. This is the highest number at the moment globally in a single day, and Pakistan went on top of the current status of cases reported in 24 hours. And this is very anxious news, and if the situation goes on in the same way and we don't show seriousness, the number will increase. Unfortunately, the poor people and ignorant people, they absolutely don't believe the virus exists. They think it is some conspiracy, all between the government and doctors kill patients with some injections. But my question to them is, if this is the case, then how come 41 doctors lost their lives? This has to be understood. The government did not play its role and failed to pass on the right information.
United Nations authorities have warned of the risk of starvation in Uganda due to reductions in aid funds by September. The pressing situation also extends to refugee camps, which will need over $5 million to continue to feed over 1 million refugees across the country.
From September, for example, we will not have any more funds to continue education. We will not have any more funds to continue supporting the over 100 health centers that we support throughout the refugee hosting districts. We will not have any more funds to continue livelihood activities or distribute soap and other non-food items.
Across the African continent, the number of COVID-19 cases has surpassed 300,000. According to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the number of deaths caused by COVID-19 in the continent has risen to over 8,000. Meanwhile, the number of recovered patients stands at more than 146,000. The continent's worst hit nation is still South Africa, which has recorded a third of all confirmed cases. Malawvians will return to the polls on Tuesday for a rerun of the presidential election. This comes 5 months after the Constitutional Court annulled the results of last year's vote. Incumbent President Peter Mutharika had initially been declared the winner of the May 2019 vote with a slim majority. However, opposition leaders challenged the results in court, citing massive irregularities. Judges agreed and nullified the results back in February and ordered a repeat of the election. The vote will pit the current president against Lazarus Chakwera, who has united the opposition under a coalition looking to unseat the ruling Democratic Progressive Party.
This electoral commission has been in office just about 2 weeks. I have been impressed by the manner in which they have, so to speak, hit the ground running. And I have confidence that they want to do what is right, protecting the rights of Malawians as they make their choice.
Nigerian doctors in state-run hospitals have called off a week-long strike over welfare and inadequate protective equipment as new coronavirus cases spike in the country. The strike by the National Association of Resident Doctors, which represents some 40% of Nigeria's physicians, began last Monday but had excluded medics treating coronavirus patients. The organisation had called the strike over a range of issues, including the grossly inadequate provision of personal protective equipment and calls for hazard pay for those working close to the virus. Other demands focused on improving general welfare and protesting layoffs.
Public hospital doctors are also unhappy about dismissals and reduced nation with 200 million inhabitants has recorded and 420 deaths as of Monday, June the...
Sudan has issued a warning against escalation and urged further negotiations with Egypt and Ethiopia over the construction of a controversial dam on the Blue Nile River. According to the Sudanese Minister of Irrigation and Water Resources, Yasser Abbas, the signing of an agreement is a prerequisite for Sudan before filling the dam. Meanwhile, Ethiopia has declared plans to start filling the dam next month, regardless of whether a deal has been reached. The $4.6 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is more than 70% complete and promises to generate much-needed electricity for the country. At Egypt's request, the Arab League is due to discuss the issue at a virtual meeting of foreign ministers on Tuesday.
It's expected to provide much-needed electricity to 100 million Ethiopians and also make it a major power exporter.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.